Noel McDermott, Psychotherapy and Consultancy Group. He joins me this morning. Noel, thank you for your time once again. As I said, this is a staggering number. We'd like this to be zero, but for it to be as high as 7% is indeed worrying. 7% of UK children apparently have attempted suicide by the age of 17. That is horrifying.
It is. And I think, as you've mentioned previously, that we do think that the figure might be higher even than that, and because of the pressures that young people have been under for this last year, that we've all been under, really.
It's a big study. 19,000 people have had their lives followed. They are in the millennium cohort. That means they were born at the start of the millennium, right across the UK, England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. And 7% of those 17-year-olds said yes if they were asked if they'd ever hurt themselves on purpose in an attempt to end their life. The obvious question, I guess, Noel, and perhaps the most difficult, is why is this happening?
Well, there are unique pressures that young people are under, not just with the pandemic, but in general. There are sort of young people under a lot of pressure these days. The pressure to sort of succeed, pressures from social media around image, etc., and that's making life very difficult for young people. And then you add the pandemic on top of that, and then you have a significant series of pressures that are going on, issues such as isolation and bullying, issues around young people being more online, although online itself is not a problem, but certain pressures come from that, and certain disconnects from the everyday sort of support that you'd expect young people to get through having real world friends, etc. So a number of factors, I think, that are leading to all of this.
Very many more, indeed, have said that they have self-harmed in the last year, 24% saying that they were in that category. One of the authors of the study, Dr. Pravitha Patali, says there's definitely a need to provide more, better and earlier support for young people to prevent their mental health difficulties from getting so severe. Well, we've talked a lot about mental health on this programme for people of all ages, but this study, as we say, focusing on the difficulties faced by young people. Do you have any sense that the provision of those services is in any way getting better?
It's very difficult to say. I mean, I think there are certain services such as child and adolescent mental health services, which are fantastic and great, but, you know, even before the pandemic, those services were struggling to meet need at that point. So there's a real sort of issue there about the point at which, you know, professional services can get involved. Now, there is some sort of really, really good and interesting news today, for example. So Public Health England have just announced that they're going to provide free, what's called mental health first aid training to anybody that works or cares for children, including parents and carers and professionals, and they're going to roll that training out. Now, with that sort of thing, what happens is that there are two things that are going to be very important about that. One is equipping people with the skills to identify when there's a serious problem earlier.
Yes.
And the sooner you get help, the better. And secondly, other sort of more general well-being, mental health well-being skills, which I think one of the Royals referred to as mental fitness, and supporting the growth of this idea of mental fitness, that what we can do to improve our capacity, our resilience, if you like, in the same way that, you know, physical fitness, the way you get fit is you go to the gym on a regular basis. We can do similar types of things with mental health as well.
I may be hunting for good news here, perhaps, but I wonder if part of what we're seeing is a reflection of the fact that young people today generally seem to be rather less repressed and more open and more in touch with their emotions and happier to talk about how they're feeling than perhaps would have been the case 20 or 30, 40 years ago. And if that's true, might we be seeing simply better detection of these issues, of these concerns, on the basis that people are happy to talk about them?
I think there is definitely something in that, and certainly around specific things such as a better detection of ADHD or better detection of autism, etc., etc. And so clearly, there's a case in which there's increased diagnosis because we have better tools to spot it. And definitely, I think in terms of sort of more general, broader sort of mental health issues. So that, but I think. The reality is that there's been a lot of underreporting, and there has historically been a lot of underreporting. And one of the things that we know for certain has happened during the pandemic is a huge amount of underreporting, because those agencies that and those people that would normally spot the problems in kids have just not been seeing them. That's all, because schools have closed, etc., etc. And so we absolutely know that there's a significant underreporting at the moment.
If someone's worried, either about themselves or about a young person in their life, what should they do?
Ring the alarm bell as soon as possible. Don't ever worry that you're going to do the wrong thing and sort of set things in motion that will make you look stupid, for example. It's never stupid to say, I'm worried about somebody. So get in touch with your GP as soon as possible. Get in touch with any professional that's involved with your kids that you trust, teacher, etc. Talk to other parents, talk to their friends if they've noticed any problems, talk to the kid themselves, have a chat with them. I guess the word I'm using the most is talk about it.
Yes.
Talk.
Easier said than done, though, isn't it? Ironically.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. But that's the key, is to get these things out in the open as soon as possible and discuss them, normalise them, take away the stigma. And, if you make the mistake of overreacting, that is so much better than the mistake of underreacting.
And it's worth remembering too, isn't it, that the National Health Service in general and GPs specifically are absolutely making the case and reminding people that they're open for business for non-COVID issues as well, whatever the health concern is.
Yeah.
The NHS is not just about COVID just now.
Yes, and particularly around mental health issues, everybody's ears are flapping around this at the moment because we all know that there's a problem. There are specific mental health issues around COVID as well, and just briefly, if you don't mind, I'll just mention those, because we're seeing sort of post-viral syndrome quite a lot now. And I think it's really important to say this one because we know that young people are not at risk medically from COVID, but they may well be at risk from some of these sort of long COVID issues. One of them being the sudden appearance of things like depression and it not being open to treatment.
Yes.
And if your kid has had COVID, or you think they might have had COVID, and they're struggling with some mental health problems, it may well be that they've got sort of post-viral sort of issues, post-viral syndrome, and that the issue that they've got is fatigue with that. And it's really important to get proper assessments of that one. Because
so that would be mental health concerns that would be specifically linked with the physical consequences of in this case,
right.
long COVID. But the mental health effects of COVID, if you're 17 or 18 or 19, I think you've got every right to feel pretty angry about what's happening right now, because these are in many ways the best years of your life, which are having to be placed entirely on hold. And I imagine if I was going through this at 17, 18 or 19, wanted to sort of make plans and get on, I would have felt very aggrieved as well, and perhaps very disappointed and very unhappy and maybe very depressed too. So that can't be understated, I think, as a factor in this.
Not at all. And I think addition to that, and well said, but addition to that is we know psychologically that when events repeat, such as these lockdowns have, the emotional and psychological consequences of them increase exponentially. And so it's not just young people suffering in this current lockdown, it's everybody. So even those people who were doing really well in the first lockdown, a lot of people reported, very positive sense around it. Around this one, it's not there at all. It's a grind for everybody. And for young people and children in particular, because they have not got as much development in their frontal lobes of the brain, etc., which comes through social contact. That's primarily one of the things that protects us, is that frontal lobe development in our brain, which happens through social contact. And because that's been cut for young people and children, that's a significant extra risk factor that's going on at the moment. I mean, for somebody as old as me, I'm so stuck in my ways that in some ways I just get on with it, you know. But for young people, developmentally, this is much more of a challenge than it is for somebody like me.
Noel, thank you very much indeed. Noel McDermott, founder of Noel McDermott Psychotherapy and Consultancy Group, joining me this morning. 0345 6060 973. 7% of children in the UK have attempted suicide by the age of 17, and nearly a quarter say they've self-harmed over the course of the last year. What's going wrong for that to be the case? That feels wrong. I don't have the data from 50 years ago or 100 years ago in front of me to say whether or not 7% of children in the UK had attempted suicide 50 or 100 years ago. But even if that were the case, it still feels wrong that so many children have attempted suicide.